bad people and bad things happen to good people and, just the way life goes, it just sort of is what it is, I mean, it's tricky. And so what I do is I've just learned not to say those words. I just have taken those words or that phrase out of my vocabulary because I have zero expectation that life is going to be fair. It just never enters the equation for me. And I just try to have a good attitude as best I can and have a strong faith no matter what happens and just assume that God is always present. He'll work things out, and he does, right? But my kids will say it's not fair. I don't like it. Does anybody else really not like that state? Like when your kids say, you get a little frustrated, right? Because it's generally after something like, oh, I wanted a second corn dog too. It's not fair. It's a corn dog, kid! You got a lot to learn. But it generally involves something really trivial or has to do with Xbox turns or chores or I don't know. And maybe it's because I grew up in a fair amount of hardship or I've seen personal suffering or I've seen just a taste of how cruel the world can be. I just don't allow those words to be spoken. Thank you, friend. That was very fair of you. You like that? Yeah, I'm going to trip on that, and I'm going to say it's not fair. Okay, so when my kids say it's not fair, I get really upset. I don't like it. I don't like it at all, and I don't want it in my house. Because when I hear it, I think, you guys have no idea what you're talking about. You just have no concept of how privileged and blessed you are. You just have no idea. And so one night a few months ago, if you don't know, my wife is a travel nurse, and she's out of the state right now, and my wife is like a presence. If you know her, you know what I'm talking about. She is a presence. And when there's fighting in the house, she's the one that will she's able to sort through it, I don't know how she does it, because when I got 8 kids. I don't know if you brain 8 kids. Yes, I said 8. Yes, they're all mine. Yes, I know how they got here. Okay, just want to go through the list. All right. So when the kids fight, and I've got my wife and I are really passionate people. So we got passionate kids. My eldest daughter, wow. Don't follow her on Twitter. Full of passion. Smart kid, full of passion. And my son Josiah, full of passion. And my son Micah, full of passion. And Elijah and Zechariah, they get real passionate too. And the babies, I don't know, they're just crazy, right? I don't know, we'll see what happens. But they'll probably be full of passion. And a couple weeks ago, the kids were fighting, and my wife's not there to sort it out. And I freeze. When they're yelling at each other, and they're pointing the finger, and I don't know what to do. Truly, I just what's going to happen? It's true. Now, it's funny because sometimes I'll be FaceTiming Andrea and I'll be talking to her and the kids will be arguing in the next room and she's like, are you going to handle that? I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, well, obviously those boys are fighting over the Xbox and the turns. And I'm like, that's in the other room. How do you know? But me, I can't deal with it. Okay? I can't. Well, she wasn't there, obviously, and they were fighting. They were getting into it, and I was just frustrated. I got, just angry and upset, and what I did was I just sort of I said, look, they started that it's not fair stuff, and I said, everyone's grounded. I'm selling all your cell phones and Xboxes, and you're sleeping in the garage. You think that made it better? No, not at all. And then it was more it's not fair. I want to do dishes. He does the dishes. It's his turn, my turn. Okay. No. And so I just got more upset. And my kids know me, right? They know that, like, when I get upset, like, I say a bunch of things, like I'm telling you, I'll be like, that's it. I'm selling your kidneys on the black market. I'm sending you to Russia, buying tickets right now. I do this stuff. I don't know, because it's just how I deal with it. But they just know if they just, like, kind of just get over, just listen, just let dad have his moment, fold some laundry, do the dishes, he'll be fine. That's true. You can chore your way out of punishment in my house. But they didn't do that. They kept fighting. And it's not fair, it's not fair, it's not fair. It was a big thing, right? You know what I did? How many people think I lost my mind and started yelling? You're like, am I allowed to raise my hand? I have done that. I didn't do that. I got super, like, emotional. I even started, like, getting a little teary-eyed. Oh, that pastor's emotional? You've never been here before, have you? Okay, so I got emotional. And I said to my kids, please, do not ever say, this is unfair in my presence ever again. And, like, this time I was emotional, and they stopped. They stopped. I said, let me tell you about life being unfair. And I started going through, like, the list of all the things that, like, had sort of, like, happened to me and their mom as we were growing up and as we've been adult. Poverty, abuse, rejection, addictions, abandonment, fear, anxiety, confusion, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I gave them, like, all the ugly stuff that I thought that they could handle, okay? And my boys listened. They got real quiet. And I explained to them that life is full of things that seem unfair, but our response to it is what determines who we are as people, right? Mm-hmm. And in spite of what I've been through, or what their mother has been through, we've been able to make our mark on the world. And that's because we don't dwell on what's fair or unfair. And we're just not going to pout when things don't go our way. Which was ironic because I think I was pouting in that moment. And we're not going to fight with each other when we don't get what we want. We're just not going to do that. Like, we are not going to pout. We're not going to fight. We're not going to say it's unfair because we're just not going to do that. And when I was done with my little talk, this is true. This is all a true story. My boys came around me and hugged me. And we love you, Dad. We love you. It was really sweet. It was kind of a cool moment. And we haven't had one fight since. That's a lie. Well, at least no one said it's not fair. Except this one time. This is true. I love this. One time, Josiah's like, Dad, it's not. And then he stopped. And then Zechariah goes, don't you dare say it, because Dad's going to start telling us his life story, and everyone's going to cry. Don't do it, bruh. That's true. That's true. That is a true story. And I laughed and laughed. But next time I do, I'm going to start making stuff up. Like, I was born in Russia, and my parents sold me. I don't know. We got to delete that out of the video, because Aaron Sweeney at alteredmovement.com is my email address, in case you're upset. Okay. But I truly believe that we are conditioned to understand if we are conditioned to understand that life is hard, it will motivate us beyond the hardship and enable us to walk with God in the process so that he can empower us to make a mark on the world. Because I think all of us have the potential to make a mark, big one, in the world around us. And I think we see this through the scriptures. And we see it very clearly in the life of this man that we're studying named Joseph. And Joseph is part of this dysfunctional family that we've been following and will continue to follow through the Old Testament as we study the Old Testament, all the way through Easter and leading up to when we talk about Jesus and how he sort of like puts a cap on this and wraps it all up and reveals a new kingdom to us. All of this stuff we've been talking about. But we learned last week that Joseph was the favorite son of a man named Jacob. And the favoritism was very obvious and caused all sorts of drama in his family. Like, Joseph, everyone knew that Joseph was loved the best. He had this big fancy coat. He didn't have to do the work that his brothers did. He would rat on them. Like it was very dysfunctional. But they threw him in a well. They wanted to kill him. They didn't. They threw him in a well, and they sold him into slavery. That's not fair. I mean, can we just agree that that's not fair? I mean, Joseph was probably a little arrogant. I mean, and that's probably true. I think, at the very least, he lacked self-awareness, and he didn't necessarily show love in the appropriate way towards his family, but he didn't deserve to be thrown into a well and, stripped of this coat that his father made him and sold into slavery. It's not fair. It's not fair. I mean, we can all agree that is not fair. No one deserves that. So what do you think happened to him? Now, some of you know what happened to him. It says in Genesis 39, verse 1. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an Egyptian, fun fact, Potiphar is essentially the Egyptian translation of the English word or name Theodore, or Teddy, or Ted. Do we have any Teds in here? We do! I mean, I've got nothing else. I just want to say that. Anyhow. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, brought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. So Joseph is sold to this man named Potiphar. He's 17 years old, and again, there was no such thing as adolescence in the ancient Near East, so he's a man, okay? He's a man. He's taken from his family, sold into slavery, taken to Egypt, which is very different than what he is used to. In Egypt, they worship everything. Like, this is a god, and that's a god, and this is a god, and that's, like, everything is worshipped. The culture is totally different, total culture shock. And then he's sold again to this man named Potiphar. Now, that's all unfair, right? Yes? Okay, all unfair. But in the middle of this unfairness, there's some really good news. I mean, someone was watching out for Joseph because the man who bought him, Potiphar, was quite wealthy. He was a government official, the captain of the guard. And this is really, really good news because this means that Joseph has the opportunity to be successful and to thrive. I mean, really, it could have been a lot worse. It says in verse 2, the Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered. And he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. Well, that sounds pretty good. Seems like things are sort of turning around because before, life was just unfair, right? It like slavery and the well and betrayed by the family and foreign land. But now it says that Joseph is blessed by God and he's prospering. Potiphar sees this. So he starts giving Joseph some responsibility. It says he entrusted to his care everything he owned. Literally everything that Potiphar had was managed by Joseph. From the time he put him in charge of his household and all he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in his house and in the field. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care. With Joseph in charge, he did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. What a life. He just eat. Just eat. Do you see what's happening here? Everything that Joseph touches turns to gold. Everything. He's got that Midas touch, as you'd call it. All Potiphar's business ventures, his crops, everything he owns is flourishing under the care of Joseph. And if you're Joseph, you'd imagine that all of the unfairness in the past was just a distant memory because God's blessing him. Things are good. He's favored in the house. Everything's looking good. Well, you know how this goes. I mean, right? Like every time things seem to be going well, something happens. Something happens. Look, I don't believe in karma. I'm not superstitious. But it just seems like something crummy is always around the corner. Right? I swear if Myles Garrett blows out a knee today, I meant to say Ben Roethlisberger. He's already playing like it. Amen. Okay. But it's just the way it works, right? It's just the way it works. Things always seem to go bad. And that's what happens here too. Can we get the next part of the... Get this next part? Okay. Can you guys read that to yourself? That's why I don't work out. You just never know. Trouble. That's trouble. That's trouble. It's not going to end well because there's two things that could happen here. Two things. Neither one of them are going to be any good for Joseph. Now, Joseph does the right thing, and he says, lady, what's wrong with you? What? Stop. I put all this work into this home trying to make things okay and everything's successful, and God is blessing it, and the master of the house, I owe him. And I would never do that to him. And most importantly, it's wrong in the sight of God. No. That doesn't seem fair, does it? No, it doesn't seem fair. Doesn't seem fair at all. Now that Joseph is doing really well, you got this drama in the mix, and it's not going to go away. She spoke to Joseph day after day. She spoke to Joseph day after day. She spoke to Joseph day after day. Ain't fair. Things were going well, and now drama is following. And as you can predict, it's going to get worse. One day, he went into the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants were inside. She caught him by the cloak and said, come to bed with me. But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and he had run out of the house, she called her household servants. Look, the Hebrew that we brought in is to take an advantage of us. He's trying to make a sport of me. But I screamed. And when he heard me scream, he left his cloak and he ran outside. That's a scoundrel. Look, this lady's lying. She's lying. Joseph didn't do any of that. That's not fair. Now, did you notice? This really jumped out at me when I was reading this. This is the second time that Joseph loses his cloak. It's the second time that he is humiliated by people that he trusted. Joseph, they take his cloak and throw him in a well. Potiphar's wife, she takes his cloak and now he's in the streets. Each time, people close to him have stripped him down and dehumanized him, embarrassed him, lied about him. And that ain't fair. That's not fair. And you know what's going to happen next. They're going to want to kill him just like his brothers did. Maybe they're just going to throw him in prison. That ain't fair. And of course, that's what happens. The Potiphar's wife, she keeps Joseph's robe, and when the master of the house comes home, she makes up some lie, and she says, he attacked me, etc., 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 and here's how he responded. He burned with anger, wouldn't you? He took him and he put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. And let me just tell you this. If you are a king's prisoner, and you are confined in jail, you're there to die. Okay? The king doesn't put people in prison without intent. It's not fair. Not fair at all. Now, Joseph's brothers, they burned with anger too. And they threw him in a well. And Potiphar's angry, and he throws Joseph in prison. That's not fair. None of it is fair. Joseph should be back home wearing that fancy coat, right? Watching his brothers work, tattling on them. That's what he should be doing. But now he's in prison. It goes from a well to a prison, and once again, he's got nothing. He's got no one. And that ain't fair. That ain't fair at all. Now, I think that there's something here that we can relate to on some level, right? Because each of us, every one of us has had some dream or hope or expectation that has broken. All of us. And this could be something as simple as not getting the hotel you wanted on vacation, or something very serious like a terminal diagnosis or a dead spouse or a lost job or a divorce. There's all sorts of unfair things that happen all the time. And I'd be willing to bet that you could probably put yourself in the shoes of Joseph. Because every single time things are looking good, something is going to go bad. Or get spoiled. Or slow down, or shut down, or burn down. And I think our experience of this can cause us to fold, right? Give up. Everyone here has given up at one point in their lives. You have. You have. And so you know what it feels like? You put the work in. You invested. You built it. You committed to it. And now it just seems like a waste, and you can't find your way back. You can't see the other side. You don't know how to regroup. You're confused. What do you do? And maybe you've even felt alone. Like you didn't have anybody else to sort of guide you and help you and encourage you. Everyone's felt this way. So what do you do? I mean, you could give up. You could eat, sleep, Netflix, feel bad for yourself, self-talk, all that stuff. Everyone's done it. That's probably what Joseph did, right? I mean, things have been unfair. A bunch of times. I mean, he even did the right thing, right? Like this woman came to him, and he even did the right thing. No. And still things go bad. You know, you ever feel that way? Like, I'm doing everything right, God. Seems pretty unfair to me. But while Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison. And he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. So it says there in verse 21. The Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor. Now, we don't know what Joseph's mental state was in that space between him being disrobed, lied about, thrown in prison. We don't know. You know, sometimes in the text you just got to kind of guess a little bit. But he was a human being, and he was probably a little upset. I'd imagine, probably frustrated, dejected. We don't see it now, but in a couple chapters we'll talk about this. Joseph presents himself as being sort of an emotional guy, okay? So I'm pretty certain that he probably felt bad about what had happened to him, but, number one, he didn't stay there. Number two, God showed his presence, his kindness, and favor in the middle of it. So hear this. When life wasn't fair, God was faithful. When life wasn't fair, God was faithful. Can you say that? When life isn't fair, God is faithful. When life isn't fair, God is faithful. You probably do better than that, but I'll give you a pass this week. I think this is something that we can understand, right? We can identify with this. We can never count on fairness. Ever, 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 ever. You can never count on fairness. But you can count on faithfulness. This means that we will all face difficulty, but we will never be alone. Do you hear me? When we face trials, we will never be abandoned. Even when we feel like we've fallen behind or fallen down or been let down, God is always working ahead. Because I'm going to tell you something. This man was unfairly treated and probably felt like nothing, like he had nothing, like he was nothing, like nothing was in his future. And God said, wait a minute, I know what's ahead. I know what's ahead. See, when we're looking back and wondering, what happened? What happened to me? Why? What's the problem? God always knows what's ahead. He's already laid a path for restoration. I had this memory of me when I was a kid. I was riding my bike, and I fell off. And I was just little, and I got scraped knee, and I think I felt like fell into like a ditch. And my dad was there, and he kind of picked me up, and he felt bad, but he was kind of laughing too, right? And it was one of those things, just like, man, I know you're going to be okay. Like, in fact, I know in 2 weeks you'll be riding this bike. I know in 4 days we'll be laughing about this because I can see what's ahead for you. But for me, as that little boy, all I knew is I was in a ditch. I couldn't ride my bike, and my knee was scraped. He's already laid a path of restoration. And this is what it looked like for Joseph. The warden put him in charge. He's made responsible for everything. The warden trusted him so much that he could do whatever he pleased, and success was wherever he went. Now, this looks a whole lot like it did when Joseph was in Potiphar's house. It looks the same. Now, the setting has changed. The details have changed. But Joseph is equally blessed. Equally favored, equally useful in the plan of God. But one thing has changed. He's in position to make a difference in the world of far greater consequence than he ever was before. And we're going to see that as we keep going. But Joseph moves from a well to Potiphar's house to this prison, all along following this path of greatness that God had in store for him that he had no idea about. No idea. And he could have said, oh man, this is terrible. It's not fair, but he didn't. He kept moving. He kept moving and made himself available to what God was going to do in his life. Now, we may think he's lost. No. He gained position, influence, wisdom, trust. And what he learned through all that unfairness was to trust in God's ability to provide, and God did provide. Now, if you're here or if you're watching from home, you're watching on Wednesday night when we post this video, you might be thinking, all I know right now is that my life is a wreck. That's all I know. That's all I can see. Okay, all right. But I want you to try this. I want you to try, after that statement, all I know is my life is a wreck, I want you to follow it with this. But I know all I have is God. And then this. I don't know what he will do, but I know he'll do something. And that's good enough for now. I promise you, I've been there, and he's always faithful. Every time. And he did something in the life of Joseph. And now, Joseph is in a position to do even greater things than he was before. You'll see. So in light of all this, I just want to give you 2 application points, 2 pieces of advice. If you're in this space where things are unfair. And look, here's the reality of the situation. If you're older than like 6 years old, you understand that life is unfair, probably especially if you're 6 years old, because you're still getting mad about corn dogs. Everyone has to know, must know, that you're either living in some unfairness right now or you're going to face it real soon. It's the way the world works. It's the way the world goes. So what do? How do you go from failing to thriving or unfairness to thriving? Just let me give you 2 pieces of advice. The first one is very simple. You didn't need to come to church for this. Don't give up. Just don't give up. And this seems extremely obvious, but I think it's just critical to keep saying this to yourself. And listen, if you're not in that space of living in unfairness right now, but maybe you know someone who is, you tell them. You tell them don't give up. Because sometimes the words that you speak are the only thing that will get people off the couch. Sometimes your encouragement is the only piece of hope that someone has. You tell them. Don't give up. Keep moving. Because it's very natural to want to give up. It is. And there's this really weird thing that happens. It's a really weird thing that happens when we lose or when we're frustrated, or when things don't go our way. We start to feel bad, right? And this weird things happens, and this isn't all sorts of songs. Like, you listen to country music, oh, you know all about this. Feeling bad feels good in some weird sort of way. Feeling bad feels good. Pastor, no one wants to feel bad. I know, but you know what feels good when you feel bad? Blaming our stuff on other people. Gossiping about other people. Celebrating other people's misfortunes. Eating lots of food. Like, I'm a stress eater. Anybody else? I'm a stress eater. Eat too much. Drink too much. Smoke too much TV, too much sleep, too much gossiping. We do all these things that make us feel better for a minute. For a minute. There's like this little endorphin rush that you get for a minute, and then the cycle keeps moving, and the self-loathing, it starts to hurt, and you feel depressed, and you feel miserable, and you start the cycle all over again. It feels good for a minute. For a minute. We get this feeling that it's okay just to sort of sit and wait and not move and give up. Can I tell you something? When you are tempted to sit and do nothing, instead of reviving that relationship, working harder It's the job where you screwed up. Trying to fix your finances where something happened that was unfair. Build your church. Work on yourself. Self-esteem, whatever it is, when you feel like it's better to sit and do nothing rather than work, rather than to get up, rather than to step forward, you are listening to a lie from the devil. Do you hear me? Because God knows he can leverage that failure or that unfairness into something greater. Listen, God doesn't waste anything. Do you hear me? Like nothing that in your life that you are going through, that you are experiencing, is wasted by God. Nothing. Nothing. So don't give up. Don't give up. Don't give up. The enemy wants to use that failure. Look, if God wants to leverage something, so does the devil. The enemy wants to use that failure or unkindness or unfairness to demoralize you, make you quit, discourage you, make you feel hopeless, make you feel purposeless. Now, why do you think that is? I'll tell you why. Because God has purposed you for something only you can do. God has purposed you for something only you can do. You are in a very unique position to do something specifically that God has assigned only to you and purposed only you to accomplish. Here's what I mean. I know this nurse, this nurse, who traveled far away from home. And she gets at this facility. And there's so many ill people, very, very sick people. This community hospital is essentially overrun. The hospital isn't set up to accommodate all these people. The nurses aren't trained for all these people, and neither are the physicians. And so they aren't doing this protocol that exists basically all over the world. Okay, very simple, but very important to the safety and comfort of these very sick people. And I talked to the nurse on the phone, and she said, I gotta go. I can't stay here because this is unsafe. It's unsafe for my license, and these people here, they are suffering, and no one here knows it. No one here knows it. And I was talking to this person on the phone, and her and I had decided, well, maybe you're there because God has purposed you to do something that only you can do. Only you. And so what this person did is she started talking to these other nurses. And she said, you have to do this thing. You have to. Because if you don't, people are going to suffer. You got to do it. And she started, the nurses, okay. And then after she sort of developed this reputation as being very competent and very smart, started bringing in these peer-reviewed articles and showing them to the nurse manager, said, see, we got to do this protocol. It has to happen. Otherwise, people are going to suffer. The nurse manager's like, oh, wow, look, you're right. And then it was the nurse practitioner she talked to. Look, we got to do this. Otherwise, these people are going to suffer. Oh, it looks like you're right. And then it was the medical director. Oh, boy, you're right. And do you know what? Now the protocol is in place. The protocol is in place. Because this one person said, I've been assigned to do something that only I can do. Right? And you may not even know what the heck I'm talking about. And you may not relate to this at all. But let me tell you this. No one can raise those kids like you can. No one can help that child with a learning disability like you can. No one can help that person who's seeking social services like you can. No one can start that business like you can. No one can help your family heal like you can. No one can help your brother out of addiction like you can. No one can revive that church like you can. And it's not that no one is more talented or gifted or more important than you. It's that no one has been gifted and appointed and positioned by God like you have. Look, he chose you to do it. Why? I don't know, but he did. Because he sees something inside of you that you don't even see. And if God chose you, you got to do it. So go do it. Because only you can. Stand up, wipe the dust off, one step at a time. Go do what God has asked of you. Now, I gave you 2 pieces of advice. Can I give you one more real quick? Can I? Okay, it's okay with Ken. Aaron, is it okay with you? I thought you were moving. Here you are. Okay, well, since he's back, in honor of him, I'm going to give you one more point. Number 1, don't give up. Number 2, go and do what only you can do. Let's do one more. If we went back to Genesis 39, in that chapter, it says the Lord was with Joseph. It says that 4 times. It says it 2 times in the beginning of the chapter, and it says it 2 times at the end of the chapter. Listen, God was with Joseph in the pit. God was with Joseph when he was sold into slavery. He was with Joseph when he was a success. He was with Joseph when he was accused. He was with Joseph when he was in prison. He was with Joseph when he was restored from failure to triumph. And everything in between. Everything in between, the Lord was with him. Understand that when life is not fair, God is with you. Because Jesus is the cornerstone of our lives. Do you understand? The cornerstone of our lives. When you think things are unfair, when you think that you can't get up to face another day, when you don't understand the magnitude of your calling and responsibility, when you go from struggle to triumph and everything in between, he is right there with you. He is saying to you, hey, I got this. Look, I'm going to do your part, my part, you do yours. Just get up and move. I can already see what's ahead. I've already won, and you are mine. So we win together. You see it. You're going to come out of this stronger. You're going to come out of this wiser. You're going to have a greater influence on people. You'll be empowered to love better, to achieve more, to live more, to hope more. So get up, stand up, keep moving, keep pressing, keep believing, because I make all things new, all things new, all things new, and that includes you. So get up.